everyone is so mad about the Nancy Gunthrie story. Now, who is Nancy Gunthrie? You already know. You want to know why? Because there was so much widespread coverage. In fact, when you do news and court updates and things like I do, you can't get away from it. And people are mad. Whenever I see a YouTuber, LawTuber, somebody who does news coverage, news updates, anything, the comment section is just filled with PO'd people. And I get it. And if you have been one of the people who looks at this and goes, okay, like, I understand, are they just doing too much of it? Are we happy that an older woman with mobility issues got hijacked? Like, what are we actually mad about? Well, you probably know we are upset not because we're happy or think that this older woman deserved to get kidnapped. We're mad about the amount of coverage that she's getting. When we know, we have seen the news about all these other innocent people who are getting yoinked off the street and sent off to wherever for very racially motivated reasons, and just insanity of political figures, and they don't get coverage. And it goes beyond that. It is this combination of how we can constantly see systemic racism in our justice system. Now, as a person who covers the justice system, and I defend it a lot, okay, I think that American justice system can be one of the best ones. I think the way it is intended to be used can be very good. However, the way it has been developed is that not everybody gets justice for a variety of reasons. The two biggest ones tend to be race and money. So Nancy Gunthrie getting kidnapped it's shocking, but it's not. She's a easy target, okay? She's an older woman with mobility issues, and she has somebody in her life who has celebrity status, and celebrity status equals high economic status. So there are people who are going to see that as an opportunity to make a quick buck, or several hundred. Now, this never or very rarely works out for kidnappers because it can become a never-ending cycle of cash flow if people know, oh, if you take that person, they'll pay the ransom. So it's very discouraged for family members and loved ones to pay a ransom, even though they initially want to. It's like, no, we need to try to get things back. We don't want to encourage that behavior. We don't want this to be perpetuated or for someone else to try again. Oh, they got money from them for this. Let us do it. And I understand that. But it's not just, it's a combination of the two, of socioeconomic status and race. And you can argue that one pulls more than the other on a variety of reasons. If we look at O.J. Simpson's case, for instance, he was a minority who had a lot of money. And when he was acquitted, people wondered, was it because the jury was actually convinced by the evidence that they were not found to go beyond a reasonable doubt? Or there was a heavy racial overtone, especially towards one of the racist members of law enforcement involved in his case, that maybe he got off because of, is it because of his name, his celebrity status? People loved football players. And this is also perpetuated because there are a lot of football players, a lot of big sports players. The NFL has some of the highest ratings of abusers in the sports world, And it is because they have money, they have fame, and they have a lot of protection around them. People do not want, and this has been perpetuated from ages and ages ago, decades and decades and decades ago, of women not being believed. And when high school and college football players who are good, who are the upcoming stars and whatever, it often seems that the people around them would rather have good football than good justice. So they do everything to try to not let their star player, this potential, we don't want to throw their life away. We've all heard the thing, we don't want them to throw their life away over one mistake. Bro, that's not a mistake. That was a series of bad choices that he should be punished for. But this happens more often, and we have seen this in a lot of cases where football players or high sports players get more leniency in the justice system. Charges don't get done, things get let go, lower sentences, or no sentence at all because of their sports affiliations. So what does this have to do with what I was talking about before? What it has to do with is that socioeconomic status, recognizability, somebody who knows their name. Fame, we've seen it that certain people of celebrity status, certain names, don't get punished the way they should because they have some kind of an affiliation. They know people, they have connections, they have resources that normal average you and I's do not. And it's very frustrating when people, and they go, well, see, that person didn't get off and they are of a certain status. And one not good person who I was unfortunately conversing with in this topic, it was very offensive. Let me warn you that it was very offensive. That in talking about this, they go, well, the reason why, like, Lacey Peterson and Nancy Gunthrie, the reason why these people, it's more shocking that something happened to them. Now, for instance, with Lacey Peterson, I'm going to touch on the offensive thing. Let me talk about Lacey Peterson. Lacey Peterson was a pregnant woman who was found beheaded and dismembered in the San Francisco Bay. And then her husband, Scott Peterson, was heavily scrutinized. Everyone heard Lacey Peterson. It was horrible. It was terrible. She was middle class. Now, of course, this was back when, like, what was middle class then is considered to be very upper class and even rich now. So let's keep that in mind. But at the time, she was considered to be, like, middle class, upper middle class. And this was a horrible crime. A new to-be mother, pregnant, and then she's just found without all of her attached, and her unborn baby was found upstream before her torso was. Gruesome, terrible, gross, bad. And of course we want to find that killer. That's terrible. Lacey Peterson's name was everywhere. Everyone talked about how terrible it was. They were speculating about who it was. And law enforcement, much like with Nancy Gunthrie, they went out and said, we're going full force. We got all hands on deck. We're really doing this. Major investigations. We're working tirelessly around the clock to find this killer. Cool. Great. Except, there's probably a name that maybe more of you have heard of now, is Evelyn. Evelyn Hernandez was a woman of around the same age, also pregnant, also found as only a torso in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the water. Exact same scenario as Lacey Peterson. But until recently, I had never heard of her name. A lot of you probably haven't heard of her name. And why is that? Because Evelyn Hernandez is a minority. Now, Evelyn Hernandez was also considered in that middle class range of things. And here's the difference. So they're both in this middle class, similar socioeconomic status, both of them in in the same area, dying in the exact same way, in the exact same pregnant condition. So why aren't we looking for a serial killer? Those are all the signs. Hey, we found a second body, and Evelyn's body was found before Lacey's. Yes, because Evelyn's body was closer to the summertime. Lacey's was found in December. So if there was this body that was a pregnant, dismembered, beheaded woman found in the water. Where was all the coverage? We didn't get news announcements of around the clock, we're all working hard, major investigations, working tirelessly, law enforcement full force for Evelyn Hernandez. And we've seen more of these stories of people who it's like there are these two very similar crimes, but only one person, a more fair-skinned person, gets the attention. And you're like, we didn't start thinking, because again, Lacey was the second body. So why weren't we thinking, is there a possible serial killer? That was only mildly touched on and quickly dismissed in that case. All the focus was on the husband, Scott Peterson. Evelyn's husband, who had a girlfriend at the time too, he was not as heavily investigated. He was mildly questioned, but after an initial questioning with law enforcement, nothing else happened. And to this day, Evelyn Hernandez's killer was never found. No one was ever charged with that crime. And so when we also see Nancy getting so much attention, and of course nobody wants to see anybody kidnapped or taken or any harm done, or at least most of us don't. Why is she getting so much coverage with all of the crime that's going on, with all of the insanity going on in the world? Why is law enforcement going full force, working tirelessly for her and not for all of these other people? I mean, there's some obvious things where it's like, investigations have been stopped because they'll make certain figures look bad. Not that they can look worse, but it's so frustrating because, yeah, I'm not saying that she doesn't deserve any news attention whatsoever, but it is so frustrating when we're getting bombarded with it. It is overwhelming so many other things in the news outlet streams. And some people are mad that YouTubers touch on it at all. Now, if you are a news court law person, having a little touch on it is fine. But the amount of updates and inflow and stuff is absolutely, it just seems unfair. And it is. And about that offensive comment, I was talking to somebody and they had said that, well, the reason why it gets more attention, like more news attention, more media attention, is because people don't really expect those things to happen in certain higher socioeconomic places. The more wealth there is, the nicer the neighborhood, the generally safer the community. So when crimes of kidnapping and stuff do happen, it's more of a shock because it's less expected. Whereas in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods where there's more gangs, etc., those kind of things are more expected. So it's not as much of a shock when they happen, and the police just don't have the resources, and they get more public pressure from the more shocking thing. Listen, I think that Evelyn's body being found with nothing except a torso is shocking no matter what the color of her skin or where she's from or from anybody else. We also see this in a lot of other situations. People who have mental disorders, as soon as you tell law enforcement that somebody has a history of schizophrenia or some other mental illness, they don't look into it as much. They just dismiss it as this person is just doing their thing. They don't want to be found. We're not looking for them. And they don't give it a lot of thought. They don't give it a lot of attention. And women who are prostitutes, people who have a history of drug use, these people are not given police attention. Now, is that entirely law enforcement's fault? They are a limited unit of people with limited money, limited time, limited resources. Now, of course, I personally think that law enforcement, a lot of places, 21 weeks or 6 months is 21 weeks is the average, 6 months is the most that somebody who is getting a badge and a gun to get to go and protect and enforce laws, that's all the training they need. Meanwhile, to defend and understand the law, you have to go to law school, you got to get a certain grade point average, and you have to constantly get your stuff updated. When you're a cop, you just do your training once and then boom, off you go. And what happens is when these bigger celebrity or other racially motivated reasons why somebody gets more media attention, that is what gives more traction to the police. That's where they get the most public attention and pressure, and so they focus more on the case that the mayor's breathing down their neck about. But we know it's not just race, because there are some people who say that certain people of minority status get off easier, they don't face consequences because nobody wants to be racist. Or maybe there's just better equality things happening. But I will say that I think socioeconomic is equal to the systemic racist problem that we have in the justice and law enforcement systems, because I have personally experienced, and I've told this story before, my car had gotten broken into. I went to go get into it, went to go put my key in, and the inside of my car was trashed. And now I knew I had locked my door, and all 3 of my other doors were locked except my front door. And then I saw where they had taken like a crowbar or something and pried it open enough to pop up the front lock, and then broke into my car and stole a bunch of my stuff. So of course I call the police, and no one around me smokes. Nobody who gets into my car smokes. And there was a cigarette butt on the passenger mat of the floor. And I was like, that's it. That is DNA evidence of the culprit. And the law enforcement officer at the scene, he dug around for a few minutes in his vehicle and got a crumpled glove. He didn't even put it on. He just had it like this. And if we say pretend like this perfume is a cigarette butt, he went like this and put it in his car. Didn't put it in a protective bag, didn't put it in any kind of a container. And I'm like, okay, I guess, they don't always have the stuff for that. Like maybe he didn't know he would find cigarette. Maybe he didn't get a chance to restock his vehicle, whatever. So, of course, I ask him, like, when can I expect DNA results? And he says, oh, I'm not sending that into the lab. It's not going to get tested. And I was flabbergasted. Just, what do you mean? Like, we have DNA evidence of the person who did this. And he goes, yeah, but you're not a high enough level, you're not a high enough caliber citizen, and your vehicle isn't a luxury vehicle, and the amount of money stolen wasn't a high enough amount of money to justify a DNA test for a cigarette butt. We're just not going to do that. Just being told that I was too poor to be helped by the police. Because, now don't get me wrong, I understand that it's a limited resource thing. I understand that the amount they have to justify, it takes money from the system and everything to be able to process DNA results. And, you can only do so much DNA testing at a time. And they're going to reserve that for, like kidnappings and murders. But there isn't a lot of that happening around me. And it just does hurt. And there's a certain level of sting when you get told you don't have enough money to be cared about. And I'm like, is that what's going to happen if I get kidnapped? Is that what's going to happen if I get shot at? Where if the shooter drops a cigarette butt by me, they're not going to process the DNA because I'm not a high enough caliber citizen to look into that, literally telling me that my situations and stuff aren't valuable. And that hurts. That's terrible. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that only certain levels of citizens, only certain, like, status, socioeconomic status, or celebrity status gets law enforcement assistance and attention. And that is what people of minority statuses, of certain sexualities, of certain mental statuses, just marginalized people as a whole, get dismissed like that all the time. So it's not just race. It's not just money. It's both of them together, where it's not right that only certain people get attention. There are lots of people who go missing in this world, who get kidnapped, and thousands of children. But Nancy gets all of the attention because she has the right amount of wealth, or wealth association, and the right race to be deserving of full force major investigations. So that's why everyone's mad. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next video, my lovely humans.